person dies, their spirit leaves them. But there's a story in Luke chapter 8 of a 12-year-old girl whose spirit returned to her. I want to read this story to you in Luke chapter 8, verse 40 through 42 and verse 49 through 56. Dr. Luke records the story like this. And it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him that he would come into his house. For he had one only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay dying. But as Jesus went, the people thronged him. In these intervening verses that I'm leaving out, we have the story of the woman with the issue of blood. She had the problem of bleeding for 12 years, and Jesus heals her as she touches the hem of his garment as he makes his way to Jairus' house. Then picking up again in verse 49, while he yet spake, there came one from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, Your daughter is dead. Trouble not the master. I can imagine that perhaps he whispered this in Jairus' ear. But Jesus heard it. It says, when Jesus heard it, he answered Jairus, saying, Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. Now notice in the context, Jairus has just witnessed the healing of this woman with the issue of blood who's been bleeding for 12 years. And Jesus says, have faith. And when he came into the house, he allowed no man to go in except Peter and James and John and the father and the mother of the maiden. So there's 6 people in the room with this corpse. 7 bodies, 6 spirits. And all wept and bewailed her. Now, I assume that means Peter, James, John, mom, and dad are all weeping. But he said, Weep not. She is not dead, but sleeps. They're crying. Earlier, Jairus was perhaps afraid because he had gotten news that his daughter was dead. So Jairus particularly went from pursuing Christ to being afraid that it was too late to weeping. Now Jesus says, don't weep, she's not dead, but she is sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn, knowing that she was dead. I assume this means Peter, James, John, Jairus, and Jairus' wife. I mean, that's the only people that are in there. And they laughed, basically saying, what's the matter with you? You don't know what you're talking about. She's dead. And he put them all out. I guess that means Peter, James, John, and Jairus and his wife. And he put them all out. They missed out on something here because of their lack of faith. And took her by the hand and called, saying, Maid, arise. And her spirit came again. And she arose straightway, and he commanded to give her food. And her parents were astonished. But he charged them that they should tell no man what was done. 3 observations from this miracle. We have the man in desperation, the miraculous interruption, and the master at work. So we have the man in desperation because he's only got one daughter and she's dying. And then, of course, she actually does die. So he's desperate. I'm sure you know what it means to be desperate. I'm sure you've been in situations where you said, man, this is a desperate circumstance. I don't see any answers. I don't see any solutions to my problem. This man was desperate. So we see the man in desperation. We see the miraculous interruption. It's interesting, as Jesus goes to Jairus' house, lots of people are with him. It's a huge crowd. So surely, people are jostling up against him and bumping up against him. And lots of people are making contact with Jesus, but it's not intentional contact. It's not purposeful contact. It's incidental contact. But this lady The woman with the issue of blood touched him with purpose. She had been bleeding for 12 years and she wanted to be whole. She's alone, she's poor, she's sick, and she wants to touch his garment, believing that this will be enough to heal her. And of course, she was healed. And as I pointed to earlier as I was reading the text, perhaps this miracle encouraged the faith of Jairus. Maybe he was, waffling a little bit or hesitating a little bit in his faith, especially once he got the news that his daughter had died. Surely, like Mary and Martha, he would have come to the natural conclusion, oh well, it's too late now, just like Mary and Martha did when Lazarus had passed away. But Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And so maybe the miracle that Jesus did on the way to Jairus' house had many purposes, and perhaps one of the purposes was to encourage Jairus to trust Jesus no matter what. Of course, he still struggled because when Jesus said she's not dead, she's sleeping, apparently Jairus didn't say, hey, if you say so, I don't understand what you're talking about, but I believe you. So that was not his response. But he had some faith. It doesn't take much for God to be encouraged to bless us. But this miraculous interruption was an important part of the story, an integral part of the story, because Luke included it. And so we have the man in desperation, the miraculous interruption, and then number 3, the master at work. He calls this little girl's spirit back into her body because he is the resurrection and the life. He has the power to raise the dead. It's interesting, after he raises her from the dead, he presents her to her parents and he says, now give her some food. I don't know why he said that. Maybe it was to demonstrate that things are going to return to normal now. You know, if you go in the hospital for surgery or something and you're in rough shape, one of the things that a lot of times they'll require you to do is to keep solid food down before they send you home. And they're convinced, hey, everything's going to be all right. And everything was going to be all right with this little girl. We don't know the rest of this story. We don't know exactly what happened to Jairus or the mother or the little girl. The Bible doesn't tell us. But I imagine there were many days of celebration after Jairus thought, my daughter is gone, and Jesus called her spirit back into her. He is the resurrection and the life.